Los Angeles, the home of Hollywood, movie stars, influencers, and everything in between. But for better or worse, LA would also be called home by something much more sinister. Let's find out how the City of Angels became the City of the Dead and dive into the story of Dead Island 2. Our story follows the thrilling adventures of one of 6 zombie-slaying heroes, depending on who the player chooses, but they all follow the same story arc. So for the sake of this video, we'll just refer to that hero as we or us, instead of choosing a single hero to follow and then have to fight in the comments about who is actually the best slayer. Carla. Sorry, that was a weird sneeze. It all begins with yet another virus outbreak, more specifically the kind that turns people into flesh-hungry, mindless undead. If it's the same mutated Kuru virus we learn about in the first game, or just something similar, isn't made clear initially. Either way, we find ourselves aboard what is likely the last plane attempting to make it out of Los Angeles to somewhere a little less zombie-infested. Aboard the plane is also the prominent horror movie star Emma Jaunt and her husband Robert Steele. Unfortunately for us, however, Robert's feeling a little hungry for brains and begins snacking on another passenger. This forces the plane's pilot to radio in about an infected on board, which prompts the military to shoot our plane out of the sky. We awaken from unconsciousness sometime later, fortunate enough to be one of the few who survived the plane crash. As we make our way through the wreckage, we find the remaining survivors, including Emma Jaunt and her close friend Michael. Tensions are high and people are kind of freaking out. Emma decides that she's going to go back to her place and wait all this out and asks us to come with. Being the heroes that we are, we decide to stick around here and help the other remaining survivors first. Emma writes her address in Bel Air on our arm and she and Michael take off. While trying to find a way to lift a large piece of plane off another passenger, we're assaulted by the undead, because it's like I always said, if there's one thing a plane crash will do, it's attract nearby undead. We fight the zombies off and continue trying to help, but ultimately all our help and kindness garner is one big zombie bite right to the arm. After getting infected, we think, oh, now's a great time to take Emma up on her offer, and trek our way to her home, all the while feeling the surge of infection pulsing through us. And it's important to note here that the autophage within us pulsing to the surface happens throughout the entire story, especially when in close proximity to zombies whose autophage has mutated them into an apex variant, so be sure to keep that in mind. When we do make it to Emma's, we find ourselves feverish and fatigued, something her housekeeper Andrea picks up on quite quickly while waving a gun in our face. Emma, Michael, and Andrea all wrestle for the gun, undecided on whether they should just shoot us or not. But as the virus continues pulsating through us, we eventually just pass out. We do wake up again sometime later, handcuffed to a treadmill, Emma having decided to spare our lives, and now we feel just fine. No fever, no aches, just completely normal and apparently immune to whatever this virus is. Michael bursts into the room to let us know that the undead have made it to the house and onto the property, someone having apparently left the gate open. We volunteer to go take care of the problem with our newfound immunity and successfully do just that. Back inside, the group is talking about what they should do, how they're all scared, and other classic apocalypse topics when we hear rustling in one of the halls. It turns out to be none other than Sam B from everyone's favorite classic early 2010s hip-hop song. Apparently, he and Emma used to have a romantic thing going on 15 years ago or so. He tells us that he's already been through this zombie thing twice before and that he's immune, to which Emma tells him that so are we. He continues to let us know that we'll need him to get out of this thing, as he's killed more zombies than we can count. Emma decides to let him stay here while we figure everything else out. We tell Sam that we need to go find whatever authorities that remain out there to tell them we're immune. It could be important for the survival of the human race. He tells us that that's a good way to get dissected, as he, and rightfully so, has trust issues with the like. He says that Emma has a 6-month supply of food in her basement and that we should just wait it out here. But we stand resolute in our decision and want to make our way to the authorities. Before heading out, we let Emma know what we're doing, and she begins to talk about how chaotic it is out there and how scared she is. But we tell her that we're not giving up and that we'll find a way out of all of this. She mentions that she was initially supposed to go to the Halperin Hotel for evacuations before taking the plane, and that might be a good place for us to look. She tells us not to forget our friends if we do find a way out, as we leave to head for the hotel. Once at the hotel, we find it pretty run down and abandoned of the living. But after doing a little searching, we make 2 discoveries. One is that the military has been using a chemical known as caustic X to dissolve the bodies of hopefully just the zombies, and two, we find a radio that puts us into contact with a man named Dr. Reuben Reed, who was a part of the CDC team in LA. After telling him we're immune, he tells us we need to make it to him in Santa Monica at all costs, as we may be the key to the cure. Before making our way to Santa Monica, we return to Emma's and tell her the news and that we should all go together, as it may be the key to getting all of us out of this mess. She is conflicted as she doesn't believe convincing Sam will be that easy since he doesn't trust those CDC and government types, and that she doesn't want to make a decision without consulting with her best friend Michael. So we go to tell Michael our idea, but unfortunately he isn't here. Andrea tells us that he went out there because he's felt written off with our and Sam B's arrival in Emma's life. But he did bring his house keys, so that's probably a good place to start. We follow Michael's trail from his house in Beverly Hills to Monarch Studios. On the movie set, we help him out of a zombie jam and find that he's collected one of Emma's movie awards along with a stash of medical supplies. He tells us that he doesn't think he can be what Emma needs and just wants to find a way to help out. Thus the medical supplies and Emma's award. Sam radios in to tell us that he has a lead on some firearms we'll need nearby, and Michael says that he can make it back without us so that we can meet up with Sam. We collect the guns with Sam and tell him our plan, and he continues to reiterate that he doesn't trust the government types and that from his experience, voices on radios promising cures are always liars. Once back at Emma's, we find that Michael has been bitten. Both us and Sam tell Emma what needs to be done. Michael needs to be put down before he turns. Emma disagrees and wants to try to treat him as she doesn't want to lose him. The pair have a heartfelt moment between them before Michael passes and the virus takes over. But before anyone else can get infected, we take Michael out. And in her grief, anger, and perhaps jealousy that we get to be immune and not her best friend, she tells us to get out of her house, and so we make our way to Dr. Reed in Santa Monica alone. And it wouldn't be a Dead Island game if we didn't have to traverse through the sewers to get to our destination, so into the poop pipes we go. Within the sewers, we meet a man named Patton, a Gulf War veteran and pilot who has lived in his sewer bunker since returning from the war, with his face burnt in such a way that living in public was hard for him. We can see various Emma Jaunt posters and cutouts around his bunker, as he's a big horror and Emma Jaunt fan, a bit of an awkward but gentle guy. He asks us to watch one of Emma's movies, Omen to Kill, with him, but we tell him we've got to make it to Santa Monica as we're immune and there's a doctor there, etc., etc. We tell him he should go to Emma's house as it's a bit of a survivor safe haven, and we're eventually trying to get everyone there rescued, but he just sits on his couch and states that he's got to watch Omen to Kill.
Omen to Kill, man! Omen to Kill!
We continue making our way through the sewer when Dr. Reed radios in to tell us that once we arrive in Santa Monica, to head to the Serling Hotel. Further into the sewer, we come across a super biomass of a cave formed from all the bodies the military has been dissolving in caustic X, something Dr. Reed calls the missing biomass. We steel our nerves and press on through the flesh tunnels until we run into a strange woman. She recognizes the autophage inside of us, and as it pulses, we can see it in her and her comrades as well, almost in a way that it was communicating with itself. We tell her we're making our way out to meet the doctor, but she tells us that our eyes are closed to what's really inside of us, and that she's going to help us let go. One of her lackeys knocks us into the flesh pit below, where we erupt into a frenzied rage, powered by whatever it is inside of us, tearing the undead threats apart with our bare hands. After the frenzy fades, the woman and her goons are gone, so we just push on and out of the sewers. And once topside, Emma radios in to tell us that she was just upset earlier and that we're always welcome at her home. After a long journey through the sewers and helping another group nearby out with a few things, we finally make it to the Serling Hotel off of Ocean Avenue, and we'll spend the rest of the game thinking about that yellow card song every time a character says it. Once inside the hotel, we finally meet Dr. Reed. He tells us that the CDC is going to send a helicopter to take us to Colorado, and only us. As we begin to protest, Dr. Reed's daughter Tisha bursts into the room, saying that the group here is out of food and that they need to go and find more. Dr. Reed argues with her about going out there, that he lost her mother and can't lose her too, and somebody else can go get the supplies. Dr. Reed then radios the CDC to get our situation sorted, but apparently it won't be as simple as he thought, as the CDC isn't calling the shots anymore, the military is, and they'll need proof that we're immune before they evacuate us. To this end, Dr. Reed says that we'll need to do the tests here ourselves, and that we'll have to go to the CDC headquarters on Santa Monica Pier and test our blood there. Once at the CDC's headquarters, we can see all the experiments they were working on before abandoning the area. More specifically, something about an autophage and its mutations. But we find the appropriate machine and get a sample of our blood. Dr. Reed calls in to let us know that we'll also have to retrieve his laptop, which has the blood drive he'll need to analyze our blood, so we head further down the pier to collect that as well. When we return to the hotel and to Dr. Reed, we find in his company the woman we had a run-in with from the sewers, a woman named Conrad. We call her out for trying to kill us, which she objects to doing, and she and Dr. Reed begin to argue a bit about it before a man named Jimmy busts in to tell the doctor that Tisha went off to scavenge for food. Dr. Reed asks us to find her and get her back safely while he analyzes the results of our blood. We track Tisha down to a nearby apartment building where she's holed up with her group. We ask her if her dad is legit, as there seems to be something off about him, as we believe him to be hiding something from us. She agrees with that sentiment and says it's the same for her as well. We mention that Conrad was with her father, which may concern her given that we still believe Conrad tried to kill us, but Tisha just refers to her as Auntie Lola. We tell her that her dad wants her back, but she asks us to give her more time. She says that we've been in a data blackout since the apocalypse started, but her group has found a data trail flowing between the Sterling Hotel to the CDC headquarters to Ramsgate Security, and she wants to investigate it further. And that she'll give us a direct line to Conrad if we want to go talk to her, to which we agree. She gives us a passcode to speak into a scope device at the OSK store that will bring us to Conrad, and after booting the servers back online, we speak it into the device. What we receive isn't a chat with Conrad, however, but a pre-recorded message of Dr. Reed speaking to a man named Noah, who is apparently immune just like us. The doctor is telling him to meet him at his lab right here off Ocean Avenue, and the recording shuffles around the conversation with something apparently having gone wrong before it shuts off. But shortly after, we receive an anonymous text with an image of the location of Dr. Reed's lab. We track that lab down and find that it's in the Ramsgate Security Center, one of the locations Tisha was investigating the flow of data to. Inside, we find the man Noah from the recording appearing to be dead within a chair in the middle of the lab. We also find the same type of machine we used to get our blood sample from earlier, and another laptop with the appropriate blood drive on it. We attempt to access the computer to see what the doctor is hiding, but we just end up surging the entire system, which jolts Noah back to life, or unlife. Noah mutates into a zombie unlike anything we've seen so far. And in our fight with it, we enter into an autophage frenzy so severe that after killing Noah, we attack Tisha as she arrives. Thinking we've just become another mindless undead, she puts a crossbow bolt in us before beating us unconscious. We awaken sometime later in the presence of Conrad and her group tending to us, and we soon realize that they're speaking to us telepathically. She tells us that what we're going through is a rebirth, and that we're incredibly rare. Whether it's simply a mutation or perhaps human evolution isn't entirely clear. She tells us that Dr. Reed calls our kind Newman, and that we are the end point, humanity distilled. She apologizes for pushing us so hard, but we needed to see, as something cataclysmic is rapidly approaching, and the Newmen are the only ones who can carry humanity through it. She says that the autophage and humanity combine to make the Newman, an immense life cycle, a survival mechanism spanning countless eons, and that we are the omega point. She also tells us that Dr. Reed is lying, that he can't make a cure, that no one can, and he's simply driven through desperation, though he was once a good man. We're apprehensive to believe her at first, so she tells us to go ask him ourselves. But as we return to the Sterling Hotel, we see a helicopter taking off from the roof. And once inside, Jimmy confirms that it was Dr. Reed and Tisha leaving in it, heading towards a hidden lab on Hollywood Boulevard that he learned after sorting through the doctor's notes, and tries spinning the start of this whole thing on us working alongside the doctor. By now, we're pretty over all this drama and just want to get the hell out of LA. So we radio in to Emma to let her know we have the location of a chopper we can steal to get them all out. We just need to convince Patton to pilot it for us. And since he's Emma's biggest fan, we may need her help in doing so. We meet Emma and Sam B at Patton's, asking him to pilot for us. He is apprehensive at first, but Emma gives him the great hero from the movie speech, which changes his mind, and we all head out towards Hollywood Boulevard. When we find the helicopter, we find the original pilot is collapsed on the ground, apparently having been killed by a bullet. And when we begin boarding the helicopter, Sam slumps to the ground, too weak to pull himself in. Emma says that he's burning up, and we can see that the virus has clearly affected him. He says that it must be a different strain this time, as his immunity has clearly failed. Just as Emma did earlier, Patton now gives us the hero speech, that we need to confront Dr. Reed and get answers, and more importantly, stop this from happening to anyone else. We track down Dr. Reed's hidden lab and find him and Tisha preparing for something inside. We call him out for infecting the city, to which Tisha asks him if that's true. He says that he killed millions to save billions, and that he did it because we're so rare that only 1 in a million become a Newman, an autophage hybrid. And he couldn't complete the cure without us, and that the autophage isn't an illness. He says that 25 years ago he found a clock in our DNA counting down to our extinction, and when that clock hits 0, the autophage will erupt in every man, woman, and child, and that humanity was just not built to last. He says that Conrad thinks the autophage exists to create the Newman, but we're just anomalies at best and puppets at worst. We tell him that we can hear the others and feel them, that we're joined. He asks us what we're joined by and what does it want, perhaps implying the existence of some sort of hive mind. He tells us to take the sample of Tisha's blood from the machine, that it will neutralize the autophage and make us human again. He says just go and get out of LA, as something is clearly beginning to mutate inside him in a real bad way, and that he can't hold on much longer. Tisha tells him to use the cure on himself, but he won't because she doesn't know all of the terrible things he's done. He admits to having modified an unborn baby with Newman blood, making the baby's blood become the cure to be harvested every day for the rest of their life. Tisha realizes that he's talking about her and becomes enraged. Dr. Reed shouts that he's sorry for stealing everything away from her and pleads for us to get her out of here. But before we can make it out, Dr. Reed mutates, destroying the lab and separating us from Tisha. We kill the mutated Dr. Reed, but can't find any signs of Tisha. We head back to the helicopter and give the cure to Sam and watch as it fixes him up right as rain. As the group gets ready to evacuate from LA, we tell him that we're going to stay behind, that there is a girl out there who is the cure, and could really use a friend. Sam gives us his battle hammer and tells us to kick some ass, and we watch as our friends finally begin to make it out of the city. The camera pans to a nearby rooftop where Conrad and the other Newman have a sniper rifle trained on us, ready to take the shot whenever. One of the other Newmen tell Conrad that our song is incoherent, to which Conrad telepathically asks us if we decided to stay with them. We reply that it's for Tisha, to which Conrad responds while walking away, "Is that the only reason?" And the game fades out as we fight off a horde of the undead. The story definitely ends on a cliffhanger, and I for one am eager to see what comes next in the DLCs, and hopefully even a future game. It's clear the hero wanted to stay for Tisha, but there is also something to be said for their acceptance of being a Newman and the power that comes with it. The game ends with the hero being pulled from both worlds. A world wherein we find Tisha and help mass produce a cure to the autophage, preventing extinction upon its eruption. And the call of the Newman, being a superior being, the next step in human evolution, and perhaps awaiting to live in a world where only the Newman remain. But we'll just have to see.